Rats at ICC. I'm here representing Team 4545 League, and this was played in team event number 59 of in week 2, and this game was selected game of the week. And it's a pretty interesting game, a little different than most, but a couple things come up that are big note. First off, if you've watched my videos, you know one thing, the number one reason why people lose games on Team 4545 League. Why is it? It's because they move too fast. Okay? White is guilty of this. We'll see as the game unfolds what goes wrong. And the other thing that's interesting is this position reaches something, it reaches a Meroxy bind type position. What's the Meroxy bind, you ask? Well, I'm going to answer it a little later, but I'll just say right now this usually out of a Sicilian defense where White has a couple of pawns up on E4 and D4, and the idea is White's got this bind on the D5 square, and there's ways to combat that. I've mentioned that in some of my videos, and we'll talk about that again when we get there, when we see the Meroxy bind, but it's not quite a normal Meroxy bind. White doesn't have a lot of the normal options he does, and perhaps had he known what those options were, he may not have diverged into a faulty strategy. And we can only, again, assume that this faulty strategy was adopted simply because he didn't take his time. And I'm really going to have to emphasize this again. I'm going to say it again in the video, or here in the beginning of the video. Why are you folks playing a slower time control if you're going to move quick? Okay. First off, you're not doing yourself a favor. You're not going to play your best game of chess. Okay. You have 3 teammates plus your alternates. They're trying to play together as a team along with you, and they're trying to score their points. Now, there's no way for me to tell what the team standing was at the time of this game was played, but I see it happen often enough to know that the people that break this rule are just not doing themselves a favor. Someone needs to reprimand them. Okay, hopefully Frank 001 sees this video and decides to take his time next game. Okay, let's go ahead and go forward with this. Okay, I usually don't look up book on these things, but sometimes it's not a bad idea. Now, it seemed to me like Queen D3 is the wrong move. That's what it just seemed like to me. Yet this is the move that's most commonly played, almost exclusively in this position. And why do I say the queen doesn't belong there? Well, the reason is, let's see, what's the best way to say it? Okay, first off, there's this little trick Black's trying to set up, okay? So the queen's a little vulnerable on this diagonal because of the skewer, okay? Now, where else would you put the queen? Okay, let's talk about that for a second. Well, A4 is out. This forward diagonal's out. B4 can run into a D5 at an inappropriate time. I'm kind of thinking that E3 is the square, and it doesn't seem natural to some respect. Let me just back up, get rid of the arrows. I'm thinking E3's a more practical square here, simply because it keeps control of this diagonal. It has some indirect pressure on the E5 square. Black would like to get D5 in. That's a freeing move, but this puts a little indirect pressure on E5. Now, logically, it blocks this bishop, and it's possible Black may chase that queen out. But let's get there first, okay? I'm just thinking E3 just smells right to me for a number of reasons. D3, it seemed a little vulnerable. We'll see when we get there, because it seemed to. Let's just revert, and we'll see what it lured White into playing. Okay, so now Bishop B5 is a threat. Okay, because now Black has if Bishop B5 is played, Black would have 2 attackers on the C4 square, and White can't play C4. And here's where I think White plays one of his first strategical mistakes. It's not necessarily a bad move. It's just one of those things that's not the best move. White goes ahead and plays c4. Now here we have the Rc bind position, okay, that I was talking about, and White's got to be happy in a way. I mean, Black's got this backward pawn on the open file. White's got this pressure on d5. White's nice and centralized. Black's got a bad bishop. I mean, White could be happy with this, but there's a few strategic problems with this that hurt White. That White can't get his normal Rc bind position, and we're going to see that in just a moment. And part of the reason is because Black's got this rook into play, and White hasn't completed his development on the queen side. Usually this knight's out to c3 in most Rc bind positions before that rook even gets to c8, and the rook probably doesn't even belong on c8. Because I was saying I was going to talk about the way to fight this Rc bind. Let me get rid of the arrows. Okay. The way to fight the Rc bind in a normal position is this rook goes on b8, and Black tries to get b5 in, okay, and lure a capture here, and then tries to force d5 in. And if Black can achieve that, he's broken the Rc bind, and the game's about even. There's other openings where this type of strategy comes in. One's out of the symmetrical English. I've covered in a few videos. I've talked about some of these plans before. Black needs to try for b5, and that's why I say the rook normally belongs on b8. But you see, there's a big difference now, and I'm going to suggest a better move for White in just a moment. But let's see what Black does. Okay, Black puts some pressure on c4. Now, how's White going to guard that? Well, the natural way is to guard it with a pawn. Okay, but bang, b5 comes right in. Now, a lot of times that's a move Black can't play in a normal Rc bind position, because the knight is already on c3. Now here with this lineup on the c file, White wouldn't be able to take on b5, but one of the reasons that the knight belongs on c3 is to hold b5 back as long as you can. Let's assume for a moment the knight was not under attack on c3 in this exact position. White could win a pawn with pawn cb5, ab5, and knight takes b5. But you see, this is not possible because the knight's still on b1. Now, White's got some dilemmas here. He can't take the pawn because there comes bishop takes b5, and there's this problem I was talking about coming back. Okay, and what that leaves White to do is stop and defend the pawn on d2. And now the whole difference is in this being in a normal Rc bind position is now evident. White didn't get his normal setup. That knight belonged on c3, but it just couldn't get there. Okay, and Black is on his way to full equality. Now let's back it up a moment and let's just suggest a better move. Okay, White would have to understand the Rc bind position and have to be able to foresee what that Black can get that b5 in, and realize that c4 was not right. Now let's take a look at how much time he spent on the move. Okay, he's got 49:49. His clock goes up 1 second, so he spent basically 44 seconds on this move, and when that's really not enough. Now, what's a good logical rule of thumb? Okay, if you don't know the opening. Now we can't expect both players to really know this opening well, but maybe they do. But a good rule of thumb, if you're not sure what to do, is develop a piece. Okay, Black has a threat. The threat's bishop b5. Why not simply just develop this knight? Now it's going to the square it wants to. Now White doesn't have his Rc bind, but hey, he's still got pressure on d5, right? And he's got one more piece in play, and this stops the bishop b5 trick because the knight will take it. Okay, so logic says that knight c3 is a better move. Now, what do the databases say? Well, you're welcome to look this up. I don't remember. I took a look, and it's not all that important. But logic says if your pieces are in play, they're going to do more for you. Okay, they're not going to do anything on the back rank. And right now, for instance, Black has to catch up in development here. White's already castled, and Black still has a little bit of work to do. But White's getting close to completing his development. So maybe in this case, the queen's okay on d3. You know, maybe my e3 is just it's based on the way White played c4. If White will play knight c3, queen d3 is probably justified. But you have to kind of understand these positions, understand that you can't get c4 and you can't get a normal Roxy bind because Black's going to do just fine. Now let's just take a quick look. What's Black going to do? Well, obviously Black should develop a piece. Now White needs to develop his bishop where you want to put it. Let's put it on e3. I'm not so worried about this move, trying to grab the bishop pair. Okay, but let's develop for Black. That's the smart thing. And if White so chooses, he can put this rook on e1, castle, and now he's ready for knight d5. Is he? Let's see. Maybe not. Maybe we're gonna get undermined on e4. Well, actually, well, we can cover that. You know, always take that if we have to, and this just brings in mind another move. Let's put the rook on f1 on d1. Now normally I don't want to put that rook there because it shuts this rook in. The reason I'm doing it is I'm trying to make sure that I don't run into a bishop b5 trick. Now we'll castle, and now when bishop comes to b5, we can take. And now Black has a little bit of a dilemma here. Does he accept double pawns, or does he give up the pawn on d6? Of course, he'll get the pawn on c2. Let's see. Take. Let's see, how do you want to do this? Take on d6 or just take on c2? Why don't we take on c2? So at least White's covered his weakness on e4. But White doesn't have to play the knight into d5, and let's just forget that and go in and complete the development. Now it's up to Black to prove he can do something here. Probably he's going to try a plan of bishop c6, try to get some play on e4, maybe consider b5 with the idea of b4. You basically have a pretty even game. A game of chess is going to ensue. But look how White's mobilized his entire army here, okay? The queen's out, both knights, the bishop, the rooks are on central files. Let's compare and contrast that with what happens. So let's get back into the game and see what happens here. And White's trying to pressure d6. Yet so many times in the Sicilian defenses, that backward pawn it's not going to be lost. It's just safe and solid. Okay, so now Black puts a little pressure on e4. You know, White's getting his pieces out here. Okay, but now White's felt it necessary to liquidate on b5, and the first part of the Black strategy of breaking the Roxy bind is accomplished. Does White have to do that? Well, you see, here's the drawback in the White position. It's this piece right here. Okay, that knight is kind of tied down to guarding c4. So the natural thing is to play it to f1, and then it can come to g3 or e3 with ideas of going to f5, maybe back to d5 if necessary, because we couldn't get there before, right? But you see, tactically, White runs into some problems here. You know, there's a pin on this bishop, but you know, Black's got a lot of nuisance value here. Let's see, knight here. Oops, look what's happened. We got a pin on the. Oops, wrong arrow. Got a pin on that rook. You know, Black. It's especially if you're moving quick. It's not easy to see this. And who wants to walk into a potential discovery? You know, whoops, and now there's more pressure on e4. You know, Black broke his pin, and he's going to win back this center pawn for a wing pawn. So it's natural to see that White doesn't want to step into allowing Black to take here. and then have to take with the rook or queen and run into some of those problems. And white certainly doesn't want to take with a pawn and get an isolated pawn. So white chooses to accommodate the black strategy of breaking the Maroczy bind. But again, the big difference is this knight's on d2. Now let's see how white conducts his game. And here's where he commits pretty much his next error, because I got to give him credit. Look at his time. It went down what? 4 minutes and 20 seconds. So it took 5 minutes on the move, but it's not a good move. Okay, what would have been better here? Well, let's talk about it for a second. Both sides have castled. Both sides have developed the queen. 3 minor pieces. The only thing missing from black's position is getting that rook on f8 in play. There's really no future attacking on the king side. Why? Because none of these pieces can get there. Okay, that's why. And even this knight's having a little trouble getting over there. White's going to be conducting a 2-piece attack here in a minute. You've got a pin on this bishop. It'd probably be more prudent to play a move like rook c2. And you know, if black develops his rook, white puts a pin on. Hey, threat. Okay. Now here's that counterplay, and you know it's basically even. But black is getting ready for d5, and there's really not much white can do about it. And why? Once again, it's because this knight is on d2. He's not on c3, and he could have been on c3 much earlier, and white would have had a little better development. So you know, it's safe to assume that black's got full equality here, but white starts to go downhill now. And here's the point where I want to talk more about time. See, one drawback with the 45-45 time control is it doesn't really favorably compare with what's out there in the real world. Yeah, some clubs run game 30 events and or game 60 events, and it compares with those. But your major money tournaments, your prize tournaments, are played like with a time control of 40 moves in 2 hours, sudden death in 1 with a delay of 5. Even the FIDE time control, the world champions play matches, 40 moves in 90 minutes with a 30-second increment. And then you get an hour or a half hour added to your clock after move 40, something like that. And you still keep that 30-second increment. And, these mean, a good game of chess lasts 3 to 5 hours. If you witness any of these big weekenders, U.S. Open, World Open, any major weekender, watch the games in the top sections. A few games will start ending after 2.5, 3 hours, but most of them a lot of the games are still going to be going at time control, and then they'll start winding up. When you play 45-45, your E-time is 75 minutes aside, or double that, 150 minutes. You got a 2.5 hour game. And most games are over in an hour and a half or 2. So comparing that with a real game, it's what's common in move 15 in a lot of these weekenders. Move 16 was actually played, is that white will have used over an hour just to reach this position, okay, or maybe a position 5 moves from now. Both sides will have used an hour. Because you have a time control of 40 moves. I don't know why these servers can't get a secondary time control instituted, like 40 moves in 2 hours or whatever, 40 and 80, sudden death in 30, whatever. I don't know why they can't do it. They're smart enough, the capability's there, but they just have never done it. It's kind of frustrating, because I'd like to see these kind of tournaments come on, and these internet created time controls like 45-45 should be retired in favor of something that gets into the real world. Okay, that's just my opinion. But I'm a long-standing veteran of chess, and I understand what it takes to get good. And to get good, you need a 3 to 5 hour game. These 2-hour games just aren't going to cut it. Okay. All right. So, end of my soapbox. What's wrong with this move? Well, white's going to be conducting a 2-piece attack here. We'll see in a moment, and it makes it's going to make black's preparation to get d5 in all the easier, and black takes steps to do there. And then white's got a great square for the knight, but the bishop comes back, and as I was saying, white does a 2-piece attack. Now there is no threat here. The g7 square is covered. But Black just goes about his business, hits E4 again, prepares D5, and White stops and covers the F3 square. But still, White's moving quickly. And as I was saying, even if White has consumed an hour on his clock, he still has 3 minutes of move average. Now, in this case, we've had 20 basically. Well, let's go one more move, and we'll see here. He goes quickly. Normally, White players are going to have an hour on their clock at this time, okay, because 20 moves in the first hour, and in some cases they'll have actually less than that. These time trouble addicts, but the point is, if this was a long game, White would have approximately an hour and 45 minutes on his clock. And that's plenty of time to sit down and try to devise a strategy. And with more time on the clock, White might not have come up with the move knight h4. White might have said, well, it doesn't really go anywhere, and since Black wants to break with d5, he's going to go along that plan. Yeah, you have to also take into account the ratings here. There's about a 250 rating point difference. Maybe White just doesn't know the strategies, but obviously Black does. Black's playing a fine game, and now Black starts a little counterattack. The queen has to be careful where it goes, or the knight's going to drop, and now White has to jettison that piece and then retreat the queen. So essentially, White's attack is broken. There is no attack. The knight's not attacking anything. The queen's is just guarding that knight, and White continues to move quickly. And now suddenly Black decides that, well, White, you're back to a one-piece attack. Now, how's White going to get another piece into play here? Well, it's not easy. This knight can't get to E4 or F3. Neither of these rooks can, even with a rook lift, can't get over to the king side. If White tries knight F1, well, he can get to E3 and G4, and I'm still not sure what White's threatening. White could kick that knight out with G4 and create a square for the rook to go to, but that's rook to G1 to G3 to H3. I mean, it's a long way off. But meanwhile, Black, while White's doing all those things, Black's playing in the center. What's the best way to meet a wing attack? Play in the center. So Black plays in the center. Boom, knight F4. Nice square for the knight. Now, that was a square that White was proud of holding on to. But now Black owns the counterpart. Now White just decides to redeploy his knight. Maybe he wants to put some pressure on D6 at the time to try to gain time, but Black just says phooey, and with tempo attacks the rook. Now that rook could have gone there earlier, but now look at the wonderful square this knight has found. That's a great square, and it's with tempo again. And now the weakness on D6 is shielded, and Black just rids himself of it. So even if White wants to try to pressure that knight in some way, shape, or form, Black's going to have plenty of defenders for it and probably end up with a passed pawn. So White grabs this. And I think it's to this point that White throws the game away. Yep, there it is. Okay, he does take his time. Okay, we're going to a little bit. He's taking, let's see, clock goes from 49:38 down to 48:11. So he took just over 2 minutes, which is close to the average time per move you get in Team 45 League. Your E-time 75 minutes, divide that by 40 move game average, it's just under 2 minutes a move. So he did take his time, but at the same time, look at the time on his clock. Now, what's he trying to do? Okay, like let's think of the thought process. Did White have candidate moves here? Okay, obviously this was his candidate move. What's he analyzing? Well, obviously he says, great, if he takes the pawn, I win a knight. Well, Black's not going to be that obliging here. Maybe White sees this check and figures that he'll come out of this okay. If black gets too aggressive, maybe I'll get a checkmate. Who knows if black saw or white saw that? I don't know. But he's obviously hoping black will take. And if black doesn't take, he can't push. He says, well, if he pushes, then I take the knight. Okay, so he sees that much. Now, what else does he analyze? Well, unfortunately, he didn't analyze everything. And one of the ways you lose a game sometimes on a tactic is you're not watching for the simple active moves, meaning threats, captures, and checks. And black to play and win. I usually like to say black to play and do the best he can, but black to play and win. This is one for the for the textbook, so to speak, because black has a tactical win, and it's made possible by white's move. And anytime you have a one side to play and win, usually unless it's a subtle move that traps a piece, cuts off a retreat. Usually, a winning move is an active move. So pause the video, have a look, and resume when you're ready. Okay, you've returned, and as I was saying, the answer is an active move. And we look at threats, captures, and checks. And to start with a check, because that's what the answer is. How come black check white? Well, like that. Boom. Okay, now, this gives white two legal replies, king g1 and rook takes g2. So this wouldn't have been a hard move to analyze if white had examined the threats, captures, and checks. Okay, this wouldn't have been a hard thing to see. So if you I went a little too quick. If you put the king on g1, there's this really annoying check here, and if you take the bishop, the rook falls with check, and black's just up a rook, bang. So that left white with one move, and that was rook takes. And now black has another active move, a subtle one that combines all sorts of tactics in the position. It's a discovery. Okay, this uncovers a threat on the rook on d1, and it attacks the queen. And normally white resigned here, as you can see in the box, but what does white do? White doesn't really have a move. The queen cannot guard the rook safely. If the rook moves, the queen falls. Well, you say, well, no, rats, look, you take that. Well, okay, fine. You take the rook with check, but now the queen's still in danger, and d1 is not under your control. So let's see, where are you going to put the queen? Looks like we have one square for it, but unfortunately this is checkmate, okay, because there's a pin on this rook. So clearly white had ambitions to try to whoops, went a little too far back. White had ambitions trying to force a win in a position that he couldn't force a win from. What should white do? Well, here's what white should do. Just bring your queen back. Okay, let's cover these weaknesses here. Okay, now if black tries a sacrifice, the point being if pawn takes, bishop takes, and the king's exposed, and here I'll show you pawn takes. Now white doesn't have to play this way, but I just wanted to illustrate it. This looks great for black, but white doesn't have to play this way. Let's see. What am I missing? Yeah, like I said, it's great for black, but when black takes this, white just picks this off. Okay. Now black's a little embarrassed when he takes back. White will just play queen takes, guarding the rook on d1, and picks up 2 minors for the rook. And I don't think, even though white's back rank's a little weak, white just picked up the 2 pieces. C1 is under control. In case some way, shape, or form black can try to get a rook down there. Black's got a little nuisance value here, but White's got two pieces for the rook. He's going to get an outside pass pawn eventually. White will prevail here. So Queen E3 makes it a game. Now what's going to happen here? Well, I like black still. Black can pressure that bishop. Okay, we're going to go with it here. You know, the knight can come here with tempo if need be, and or just let it sit. Let's see. I think this is a good move. Okay, so now White needs to move his queen, and Black should be fine here. The reason I like black is because White's got a weakness on A2. Okay, White's pawns are kind of immobilized. It's still a game of chess. It could go either way, but I think the black position's a little more active than the white position. The knight is better. The knight on F5 is better than its counterpart. The rooks aren't doubled except on the back rank, but black's watching two files for what it's worth, and black's got some pressure on this long diagonal. The queen and bishop are at least working together. There could be some tactics, as I showed the tricks of a sacrifice. Black might be able to generate something in here. Anyway, in effect, let's go to the final position. And let's look at the time. 13 minutes have come off Black's clock. Plus, he's played 30 moves, so he's gotten an extra 15 minutes. So he's taken 28 minutes on this game, and White's gained 3 minutes on his clock. So, and gained 15 on the increment. So let's see, how long did White spend on this game? 12 minutes. So the game lasts 40 minutes. Okay, that's how long this game lasted, 40 minutes. Now that's not even a game in 30 situation, which is the shortest time control the United States Chess Federation will rate for a regular rating. They'll rate game 60 and shorter both ways, down to game 30 quick rating and standard rating, but they won't rate it. But anything shorter than game 30, they'll rate under quick chess only, not under your standard rating. So a 40-minute game is not chess. 40 minutes will easily pass when neither side has reached move 10 in a real game. And what did the position look like at move 10? Well, let's just see. Let's go back 40, and we'll see. There it is with the B5 break, where White's trying to devise a strategy and it realizes he has to play knight D2. Okay, so a normal game of chess, you know, this would have, where they're playing under proper conditions, where they're taking their average of 3 minutes a move. This maybe C4 wouldn't have been played, and White would have played the correct move, and you know, the game's even. That's what it is. By not developing the piece to its best square, White ended up wasting some pawn moves. You know, B3 and C4 were both played when he could have had his pieces developed. And you know, one of the reasons is that you're playing too quick. Maybe if you know the strategies, even if you know the strategies, if you move too quick, you could forget the strategies because you don't stop and consider the candidate moves and evaluate the positions of what you want to go into. But anyways, I'm sure this won't be the last game of the week where the loser uses all of his time. I mean, doesn't use his time. I hope it will be. I would like to see games where, and we've had a few, where both sides are playing off the increment every move at starting around move 20, and we get these exciting battles going. Those are fun, and I'm sure we'll see again. But moral of the story is, if you don't take your time, you're going to lose. Okay? Why play chess if you're not going to take your time? All right. Thanks for your time, and looking forward to making the next video. Take care. Bye now.